Lights. Approaches. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, they can't hold a flame against you, ay. Blow the whistle, blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, got the game, it ain't no issue, yeah. Blowing the whistle, I had enough with you, the championship, it is gone. Ain't listen to you, I can't give it to you, cause you don't know what I've been on. This is the Coaches Podcast.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Fantasy Coaches Podcast. I am your host, as always, guys, Coach Steve. We have another amazing episode for you guys today. We are talking Dynasty Startup Mock Draft. It's a mock draft show today, guys. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's already pre-done, so we're going to discuss it, go into details about, some trends, some players that we like, dislike during this draft here. We're going to do a lot of fun things here today's show. And, of course, we have Coach Tyler on today's show. What's going on, Tyler?
What's up, guys? Glad to be here. Glad to talk some ball. Let's go.
Absolutely. Like I said, guys, we have this mock draft that we did over the weekend. Did not expect it to finish as quickly as it did, but it actually went relatively fast. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But before we get into the mock draft, we do have to go over some news from last week that we missed during our free agency show. So starting off, D'Onta Foreman signed a one-year deal with the Browns. I don't know about you, Tyler, but this could be interesting. D'Onta Foreman the last 3 years has had some kind of impact in fantasy. We know Nick Chubb's, recovering from that injury here. Do you see any value in D'Onta Foreman in 24?
Yeah, like you said, it all depends on Nick Chubb and his health. If Nick Chubb comes back, we know he had the gruesome knee injury, so we're all kind of waiting on pins and needles to see if he comes back to be Nick Chubb or if that's kind of the beginning of the end for him. I think Foreman could have some value. Just looking at the backfield, looking at the opportunity. Definitely, if you have him and you can convince someone that Nick Chubb is not going to be ready by the beginning of the season and he's going to be running behind that offensive line, then I would sell high on him if you can. But he's not a guy that I would be buying into because I almost expect Nick Chubb to come back and be, take a couple weeks, but be decently fine. But I don't think that Foreman's going to be a formidable starter for you in fantasy.
I mean, I hope he is. I like Foreman. He's a good, strong running back. But yeah, Tyler, you're right. I mean, sell high if you can. If you're someone's willing to buy into that situation, like I just mentioned, he's been real productive over the last 3 years in fantasy. So, whenever the last 3 years, he was involved in injury situations with Derrick Henry and Khalil Herbert last year, the last 3 years. So there's potential for Foreman there. But if not, if you hold on to him, he's definitely a decent bench stash on your dynasty roster. Just see kind of what happens, if something happens to Chubb or if they don't like what they're getting out of Jerome Ford. So it's definitely someone to hold on to for the time being. Staying in with the Browns here, they decided to give Jerry Jeudy a nice extension, a nice 3-year, $52 million extension. Does this move the needle for you for Jerry Jeudy's dynasty value at all? Does an extension like this give you any confidence that he's worth buying into? Maybe now is an even better time to maybe sell off?
I think now would definitely be a better time to sell off than it was because, we're trying to see how he's going to fit into the Browns. We are questioning if he's going to be the wide receiver 2, if it's going to be Elijah Moore, or if this whole Jerry Jeudy to the Browns is the same hype that Elijah Moore to the Browns was last year. So I think he's a guy. I saw everything I feel like I needed to see out of him in Denver to sell off, especially if that new extension is attractive to people. But with what we saw out of Deshaun Watson, put up some decent fantasy numbers in the few games that he's played, or the few games that he played last year and the few games that he played the season before for the Browns. But he's not going to be able to go out there and justify having an Amari Cooper and David Njoku and then fitting Jerry Jeudy into there as possibly a third target, if not a second. I don't think that that's going to be sustainable. So I think you leverage this and sell off if you can. Sell high because he's got the money that shows that there's some sort of dedication to him. But he's not a guy that I'm going to go buy just because I look at the landscape of that team. And at the same time, it's a run-first team. So we're looking at possibly the third option passing-wise on a run-first team who might change their identity but also I don't think Stefanski's going to change on that.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting to see him get that kind of extension because outside of really one season, really hasn't been able to stay on the field nor be a consistent producer for fantasy football. It is definitely a great time if you have Jerry Jeudy in dynasty leagues. This is a great example of like, hey, the Browns just bought into him. Like he's going to be here the next 3 seasons. He's going to be the wide receiver 2, potentially the wide receiver 1 after the season, whatever it may be. That's obviously could change from now to then, but it's a good time to sell off. I've always didn't really like Jeudy coming out of the draft when he came out. A body catching wide receiver is not someone I always love to have on my team just because the way they handle the ball. And Sean Watson is definitely not the same guy he was a couple years ago. I'm not sure if he's ever going to be back to that kind of form, but it's a great time to sell off on Jerry Jeudy now. And then last but not least, Mike Williams signed with the Jets on a 1-year deal here. How do you feel about Mike Williams now in New York with this offense here, Tyler?
Mike Williams isn't a guy that I really love. We don't want to throw the injury prone label on guys, but if there's injury prone, it's Mike Williams. And he's going into, I think a team that's, already got a solidified Garrett Wilson. Breece Hall has been killing it there when he's been able to be healthy. But I just don't see Mike Williams playing 2/3 of his 1-year contract just because of the injury history. And I feel like that's part of the reason that the Chargers were okay parting with him is because, you're paying him all this money and you're taking these cap hits and he's not able to be on the field for you. And if he is, he's a very up and down guy. There was some very slight production consistency, but it was very week to week as he's gone along his career. And so I think the inconsistency mixed with the injury, I don't love it, especially in New York. But, I feel like I'm just saying all these guys are sell highs. If you can sell high, sell high.
Unfortunately.
It's just, we had our free agency show where we're talking about buying guys. At this point in the offseason, it's kind of sell time if you can sell. So
I mean, it makes sense to sell, obviously, now that he has a team. People might like, oh, he's going to be with Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson. Definitely a great time to go buy Garrett Wilson if Mike Williams can stay on the field there. That's a great thing for his own personal sake. The double coverage that Garrett Wilson saw the last few years without a reliable second wide receiver, whether or not Williams is on the field or not, is definitely just going to help him out in a total sense. But Mike Williams with this offense here, I did an article on Aaron Rodgers and his wide receiver 2 over the years. It hasn't been that great, honestly. Most of the time they average around 60, 70 yard targets. And really they end up with around, 580 yards on the season. And they're not even the top 2 target on the team there. Be there back at his time most of his time in Green Bay, obviously. So Mike Williams being able to thrive with the Jets just doesn't make a lot of sense. Plus, the MetLife turf is so bad. It's caused so many injuries. Mike Williams is already hurt from indoor stadiums. Like, this man is not going to be able to survive 17 games. Sell him off now.
He ended up in the worst landing spot for the injury-prone tag.
He did. Get a couple thirds. If you could squeeze a second out of it, great. If not, get a couple thirds out of it. Get a young wide receiver in this draft class, then have Mike Williams on the team, even if you're a contender. All right, so that's enough with the news. That's really about it. Unless if there's anything you want to say about the NFL rule changes today.
As someone who got hurt by the Mark Andrews hip drop tackle in the back half of the season, I'm glad that's gone. Say what you will about the league. Just as someone who's been hurt because of the hip drop tackle, I love seeing it. For someone who loves the physicality of seeing grown men run around and throw themselves at each other. I hate it, but it's the way the league has been trending for years. We saw it start with the quarterbacks, and it's the way the league is going to go. So I saw a lot on the media saying target tight ends that are going out in the flats because those nickel corners aren't going to be able to stop them anymore.
They're definitely not. It's going to be the year of the tight ends moving forward. So we'll have to see. But, everyone has their opinion on it. People wanted the league to stay more physical. People wanted the players to stay healthy, actually be on the field. there's a lot of pros and cons when you look at it in different ways, but these are the changes that are going to be made eventually. The NFL is taking, players' health into more consideration, and it's just what it is. So defenders, unfortunately, going to have to find different ways to tackle until that time frame that comes, until they, do it themselves or find a rule that helps out defenders. I think 15 yards is a bit much, though. I feel like it's like a 5-yard penalty.
Yeah.
I feel like it's just, it's just so natural to probably for a lot of NFL players just to make that kind of tackle where it's like, come on, like it's going to be crazy, I think, with penalties this year, but.
Oh yeah.
But all right, enough with the news for the day. That's really about it. NFL drafts in a month. We're talking rookies all next month. Can't wait. But this is the last show of normal Dynasty, I guess you could say, for a while, and then we're going to get into rookies the next couple months here. So we figured, you know what, let's make it easy. Let's have a nice mock draft show. So if you're tuning in from the mock draft, welcome in. I appreciate you guys joining the mock draft with us over the weekend. It was a lot of fun, obviously, getting a lot of these picks in about 2-day span, which was pretty quick, which I like. So we did about 20 rounds. Superflex, tight end premium. We added in the 2024 rookie players. We didn't go with like a kicker situation or something like that. We made it easy for ourselves. So you're going to see these the 24 rookies in this mock draft here. So let's get started here with the mock draft here. So we'll start here at the top. I'm going to try to hide the round so you can't see them all at once here. So Tyler, you had the 5th pick and I had the 9th pick in this draft. Any particular reason why you chose that, since we both had our options before anyone else?
Yeah. I just saw you in the back half of the draft, so I thought I'd try and get something in the front half of it. Didn't want to be on the turn because I felt like that either gave me too much talent or not enough talent. So I like to be, in the middle. I feel like a lot of people that are focused on mock drafts are those people that fall in the middle. Because if you're at the beginning, you know exactly where you're going. If you're at the end, you kind of know how it's going to fall to you. But that middle spot is where you really have choices. And so I liked being there at 5, kind of getting to play the field the way I wanted to.
I like that. All right, so let's start going through this mock draft here. We'll start with round 1. Obviously, the top guy off the board was Josh Allen. You could make an argument for Pat Mahomes, whatever you want to do. But, Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, usually the 1-2 in a lot of startups still. CJ Stroud goes number 3 here. Do you feel like that's justified for a young quarterback like that over like Hurts, Jackson, and Burrow?
As a Houston fan, obviously want to say yes. I think what we saw in his rookie season, it's almost perfectly justified just because he's got those years on everyone else. I mean, he's 22. I think he's going to be 23 when the league year starts. Joe Burrow's 27. So you're getting, about 4 or 5 year difference right there. And then Hurts and Lamar aren't too far from Burrow in terms of the age. And so you're getting that young stud. The Texans have been very open about wanting to extend Nico Collins, who, he looked all right in his first few seasons, but when he finally got a quarterback back there with Stroud, he kind of popped off. You have Tank Dell, who's supposedly recovering well from his broken leg. And he's on a rookie contract, so you've got him for at least another 3 years, if not a 5th-year option with that. They just re-signed Dalton Schultz, just brought in Joe Mixon. The Texans look like a team that wants to surround Stroud with talent, especially while he's on this rookie contract, and they can. And even as they continue to make their defense better, I feel like they're not a team that's going to resort to the run as much because they do have someone in Stroud that can throw the ball 35, 40 times a game and be successful doing it. And so I think the age mixed with the team commitment to actually putting someone around him. We see Hurts, who has, so much of his value is tied up in those rushing touchdowns and those short yardage situations. Lamar Jackson, he's a running quarterback, but, I picked him, but they also have rushing quarterbacks have a shorter shelf life than pocket passers, which we've seen. And then Joe Burrow, the age, plus he's not a guy that's stayed extremely healthy through his career. He's the name value of the 2019 LSU Tiger team. Everyone loves Burrow and what he can do. But if you go and look at his seasons, I don't think he's played a complete season yet. Like, I think he's missed games in every season.
I think he played the year of the Super Bowl. I think he played a full season.
Okay,
maybe he didn't play week 18 or whatever that week was. But
yeah. So we have that season, but it's just he hasn't been completely healthy. So we're seeing
That's fair.
We're seeing his first year, 10 games, obviously torn ACL. They have 16 and 17 games, which is still quarterback 7, quarterback 4 in standard scoring. And then last year, another 10 games. So when he's healthy, he's great. He did just lose T. Higgins, but he's starting to get older. And
T. Higgins still there technically, so I mean,
oh yeah,
at the time frame, T. Higgins still a member of the Bengals, but no,
as of right now, T. Higgins is there.
No, that makes a lot of sense
gone.
though. That makes a lot of sense. Stroud going at 103, I think it's perfectly fine nowadays. You have the age, you have a guy who's not relying on his mobility to get the job done. Obviously, you know, that is obviously a pick where you're maybe looking towards a long-term or year 2 kind of situation, then maybe going Hurts or Jackson. Obviously, right now you're looking for more of a win-nows approach. Is the injury thing kind of why you took Jackson over Burrow? Is that kind of what it is?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, coming off the MVP season, and the Ravens are still somewhat committed to putting talent around him.
That's fair.
We'll see what they do in the draft in terms of receivers and stuff. But
I mean, they need to get him some more receivers.
Yeah, well, they just need to start doing 2 tight end sets with Andrews and Likely.
They do.
They've got it to use it. But
yeah.
I think they kind of have to go receiver in the draft. Zay Flowers is good. We talked about Rashad Bateman last week. So I think they need to go at least receiver in one of the first 2 rounds get him some more weapons. But signing Derrick Henry takes a little bit of the rushing load off of him, but also makes it more explosive to the fact of he doesn't have to go up the middle. He can use those outside runs because they have someone that can go and get the short yardage when it's needed. But also you have Derrick Henry who can just run the ball 50 times.
That's fair. I like that. So after Jackson Burrow goes, a couple wide receivers, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, and then I feel like I got a steal at the 109 with Justin Herbert. I know the situation with his wide receivers looking a little different from the past years here, but he's still a player that I want to invest in. And then getting him at the 109 for me makes a ton of sense. I know that this, Jim Harbaugh offense is going to be wanting to run the ball, but again, that's only goes so far if you really want to make it big in the NFL. It's last time he coached. I mean, the NFL was completely different, and the passing has really evolved into more of you got to have a passing offense to really thrive in the NFL. And obviously, he'll learn that early on. And he's got decent weapons. Joshua Palmer, if Quentin Johnson can step up, that'd be great. The likelihood of them drafting a wide receiver at 5, I feel like is pretty high at this point. He's got a decent tight end core, not great, but decent. Him falling at 109, I thought it was a pretty overall good move. He's still young enough. I think he's only 25, 26. He's still a relatively young quarterback. You're going to get for at least another 7 to 8 years at least for fantasy. And he obviously he's a much safer situation than Anthony Richardson. Obviously, I could have went that route as well, but I just prefer the consistency that Herbert has given us over the years, over the up and down that I don't know what Anthony Richardson is still yet to do, even though it was great to see him as a rookie. And then Jamar Chase, Amon St. Brown went to finish off the round 1. And then round 2 came in with Bijan Robinson starting us off at the 2-1. And then a couple of rookies went off the board here, and Williams and Harrison. How do you feel about the rookies going off the board here now? I think that's a fair shot for these guys in terms of where they're positioned at.
Yeah, I definitely think they went in about the position that everyone would have expected them to. Williams coming off the board at, I think that's QB9. And so, if he's this generational talent that everyone's been falling in love over, then that's about where he needs to go in terms of where his floor should be. If he's as advertised, there's obviously, it needs to be seen what he does in presumably the Bears offense. But I think that's a fair landing spot for him. And then Marvin Harrison, again, he's one of those guys that he enters that top 5 conversation the second he goes into the league. And looking back at Justin Herbert with all the JJ McCarthy buzz, I don't know if it's just media or not, but there's a chance the first 4 picks are quarterbacks. And so that leaves the Chargers, who for the most part are receiver-less right now, with Marvin Harrison Jr. And so that elevates Justin Herbert so much. And we'll see if Harbaugh is smart enough to pull the trigger on that. But I think Harrison as long as he doesn't end up somewhere where he doesn't have a quarterback, he's going to be in that top 5 conversation immediately, and that's exactly where he goes here. We have A.J. Brown, who's kind of boom or bust. He has some consistency. Puka Nacua, we saw the 1 year. He did amazing. We need to see what the sophomore year looks like. And then Garrett Wilson coming up at the end of the round. He's one of those guys we just need to see him, actually catch a couple balls from Aaron Rodgers to fully buy into it. But we know he's got the talent. We know he presumably has the quarterback. It's just we need to see it. And I think the allure of Marvin Harrison right there is too attractive not to bite on at wide receiver 5.
Yeah, Ryan Roberts said, very boom or bust for Anthony Richardson and Marvin Harrison combo for the first 2 picks. It definitely could be a big boom. I mean, Harrison for sure. Richardson has a high chance, that's for sure. We'll have to wait and see. But it's definitely an interesting combination there. Following the rookie picks there, obviously I went with Breece Hall. More and more that I keep on doing all these different dynasty leagues that I'm in consistently throughout my career doing dynasty now. It just feels like having at least one elite running back makes a ton of sense. And I prefer Breece Hall over Christian McCaffrey, strictly due to age. I prefer the youth, where I think Breece Hall can still have the same level of elite play in a season that Christian McCaffrey can have this entire year here. And clearly, if Herbert's having a down year with the lack of receivers, for me, it's building into me having more of a year or 2 set up where I go off and have a big win. But we'll have to wait and see. I think Hall has a lot of upside still with Aaron Rodgers coming back, being able to have those dump off passes, especially with the torn Achilles with Aaron Rodgers. There might be more opportunity for Hall in that sense. And then obviously defenses are going to have to, sit back a little bit more with Aaron Rodgers on the field compared to Zach Wilson or whoever else started at quarterback. I can't even think who started for the Jets last year, but
this is
Tim
2 years
Boyle,
removed
Todd,
from
whatever
Mike
his name,
White.
Tim Boyle. Yeah, it wasn't a good situation. Let's say that. But how do you feel about Kyle Murray? Early on in round 2 here, how do you feel about him going this early?
When he plays, he is fantastic for fantasy. But I just look at Arizona and, they've got, the emergence of Trey McBride, but they have no more Hollywood Brown. They have no more Rondale Moore. They have Michael Wilson, who was one of those sleepers that everyone was kind of buying in, 4th rounds last year. But I look at him in almost the same vein as Justin Herbert, if not worse, in terms of he's a great quarterback, but I just look at what's around him and there's not much to love. And so I think, especially looking at some of the quarterbacks that went right after Murray and someone like Jordan Love, maybe Trevor Lawrence, I'm kind of low on Trevor Lawrence, and then like a Brock Purdy, we see guys that have weapons and have success with those weapons and also aren't the mobile quarterback that's going to get hit and get hurt like Kyler Murray has. So I think I take the quarterback with the weapons, especially if those quarterbacks have shown success over someone like Kyler.
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, I think Murray has a lot of upside to his game that if he gets Marvin Harrison Jr. or if they make some kind of trade for like a T. Higgins or something like that, it's definitely good value there. I think what people portray Kyler Murray right now, just the last few years, him being injured, him dealing with a lot of stuff, it's like, oh, it's kind of early for Murray. But, this is where if he had a healthy season, he could be a first-round pick still in dynasty leagues. But, someone might think differently and might think, hey, this is a value for Kyler Murray, a guy who gives me a QB1 upside, which is definitely possible for sure. If they take Marvin Harrison at 4, does that change your opinion on him?
Definitely. Kind of in the same way of Justin Herbert, where, I like Justin Herbert as a player. I don't love the room around him, but you add that elite weapon like Marvin Harrison and it boosts him up my board. I think Herbert was a great value pick for you, and that could be the same thing for Murray right here if he gets someone like Marvin, because, most of Kyler Murray's time in Arizona, I feel like he hasn't had too many multiple weapon seasons. he's had guys that he can play around like a D-Hop and Hollywood who both aren't overly successful together.
I don't think they've been on the field that much, Hopkins and Brown. I'd
Yeah.
have to go look, but I feel like there wasn't a lot of time on the field where they were both healthy on the field together.
Exactly. So you look at Kyler Murray, and he's able to support that one guy, and there's a chance we see with Trey McBride if he Trey McBride, and then if Marvin ends up there, we see that elite weaponry for him to finally be able to use in conjunction. I think it moves him up the board for me, but I think right here is about. I feel like right here, as we see the team today, yeah, it's too high for me. I think Marv at 4 could push him up near this level just because that's a more elite weapon than Jordan Love has or Trevor Lawrence has. But at this point, I think it is drafting him at his ceiling right here.
But I get it, though, because like if he skipped him on Murray, you going with what? If Tua stays where he's at, you're looking at Goff, Watson. You want that upside for QB1 in Superflex League. So, if you look at the rest of the guys, they all have issues too. And Murray has the rushing upside that some of these other guys don't have to that level. So there's that, I get it. Why Murray, you take Murray there at the 2-5. So I get it. So let's go down here. We obviously AJ Brown, Puka goes off the board here. You took CMC. I think this is a pretty obvious one for you. Why CMC over the quarterbacks?
Yeah. I saw the youth in the quarterbacks, and it was really between Christian McCaffrey, Jordan Love. But just I don't want to say, I'll say the lack of elite running backs that would be after where I left McCaffrey and then presumably Gibbs before it turned back around to me. Jonathan Taylor, he was elite, and now we're still waiting to see him get back to that RB1 form, like that true RB1 form. And then Kenneth Walker, the injuries, Kyron Williams, we've seen the one season, but every metric tells you he's not an elite running back outside of what he just did this past season. So I felt Christian McCaffrey, especially with the pick of Lamar Jackson, we're taking MVP right off his MVP year and offensive player of the year, who since he's got to the 49ers doesn't look like he's slowing down. And a lot more of that value has come from his rushing than his receiving, like we saw in Carolina. And so I feel like, he just put up a 2,000-yard season. He's, I think, going to be 28. So he's starting to get over that cliff where we see running backs begin to fall off. But at the same time, he's on one of the best teams in the NFL, one of the best offenses in the NFL, and he shows no signs of slowing down. And there's not too many people behind him that are going to compete for touches with him. They're just going to kind of get the leftovers. So I feel like matching that with Lamar sort of gives me that elite 1-2 punch, which then as we get into the third round, you can see where I start to move back into QB.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So like I said, CMC goes there to Tyler. You have Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence, Garrett Wilson, Jahmyr Gibbs to finish off round 2. Round 3 starts with Tyreek Hill, which I feel like in round 3, that's a pretty good value for a guy as your wide receiver 1 for this season here. Brock Purdy, Brandon Ayuk, Malik Neighbors, the rookie goes off the board here. So we'll go back to you here with Dak Prescott. Why Dak over Tua?
I just feel like
safety.
A little bit of both. I just look at the Dallas Cowboys. So I'm a Houston fan. I grew up around Cowboys fans. Not a big love for that franchise at all. But I feel like every time I watch the Cowboys in the regular season, they're just dominating teams. And a lot of that comes from the passing game, especially now that they presumably are sending out Rico Dowell and Deuce. What's his last name? Deuce Vaughn.
Deuce Vaughn, yeah.
As their running backs right now, right? We think they're going to get one in the draft. But that Dak and CD connection, as CD's continued to grow, he's gotten better and better each year. And he's a safety net for Dak. And they just seem to somehow always get these super under 500 team friendly schedules where they're just dominating teams. And the playoffs don't matter for fantasy. And so I think behind an offensive line that's, it's starting to, I don't want to say fall apart, but pieces are starting to move from the elite number one offensive line that they have been for the past, 5 years. I think it's a great pick in terms of the quarterbacks that were left because I think because of who the Cowboys are.
Okay.
Yeah, a great pick. But just I look at the franchise and who the Cowboys are and how, sometimes the NFL will be nicer to those dominant franchises that have, been faces of the league. And so Prescott's going to get these easy schedules. He's going to be able to throw for 350 and 3 touchdowns. And the Cowboys are going to be the Cowboys for the regular season. And that's all that matters for fantasy.
Fair. I like it. Following the Prescott pick, obviously Chris Olave, Tua, Nico Collins. I went with Sam Laporta, tight end premium league. I've learned over the years, I feel like it's just an importance to have one of the top tier tight ends. Laporta's young. He's 22 years old. He's going to be a staple for this Lions offense for hopefully a lot of years here. And whether or not, Jameson Williams gets, some more playing time or more opportunity, I still think Laporta is going to have himself the number 2 role in this offense, even with Jahmyr Gibbs going to year 2. He's still going to be a value for me, I think, at this spot here. And I personally feel like he is going to be a consistent factor for fantasy football for many years to come. So I took my tight end early because I felt like he is going to be a stable where some of the other guys, there's upside to him that you might say it might be better than Laporta, but the consistency might not be there for me. That's why I see a lot of these guys. Jonathan Taylor goes into after that. I think the Justin Fields might have been a computer pick just based off sleeper ADP at the time. How early do you take Justin Fields in a startup right now?
Looking down at what we had in our draft, I like him about maybe that 9th round. The 9th round, we'll get to it later, but the 2 quarterbacks taken in the 9th round are Will Levis and Matthew Stafford. So sort of the theory that I brought up, I want to say it was last week, talking about Pittsburgh and how it's a conditional 6th that turns into a 4th based on if he plays 51% of the season. The Steelers could give Russ this year to try and prove it, go be able to trade him off somewhere. Then they get a starting quarterback in Justin Fields for a 6th round pick. If Omar Khan is playing the mind games that we've seen him play, especially with the Bears franchise, I think that this could be the easiest path for him to go in and be the presumable starter without him actually going into camp and beating out Russ. We'll see what that looks like. But I think around that 8th, 9th round where you have some, I don't want to say lower end talent with Will Levis, but there's not a ton going on in Tennessee that intrigues me. And then Matthew Stafford, he's consistent. He's a wide receiver 1 maker, but he's getting up there in age. He's 36 years old, and we've seen some injuries start to slowly creep into his career. And so I think around that area is where I'm able to take the risk on him, especially if I've taken my 2 starting quarterbacks in the rounds before that. So I've got the flexibility to play off of if Fields becomes a starter. If not, I can trade him off and begin to build my team following the draft.
Of course. I like that. So Fields obviously goes to the 3-11. Well, or not, he should be there. Jared Goff finishes off round 3. Round 4, we got Deshaun Watson, Michael Pittman Jr., Brock Bowers. And then I went with Jalen Waddle. Again, I could have chose Jake London. Absolutely. I think that was in my mindset of going one of those 2 guys there. I think there is definitely potential upside for London this year, and you could definitely have argued that London maybe should have been the preferred pick to a lot of people, and I understand that completely. But I feel like Jalen Waddle's time will come as the wide receiver 1, and I feel like his upside can be even better than Drake London. Tyreek Hill only has another season or 2 left in his NFL career, maybe potentially. And I think Jalen Waddle has potential for still a lot of long-term success. Him and Tua have a pretty strong connection together in this Dolphins offense here. And I went that direction here. I think you could have won Drake London pretty easily. You could have won maybe I think between those 2, that's probably where my head was at the time. But following that, Ken Walker, Jaden Daniels, you took Rome Odunze. Do you like that pick there? Why over Smith, Rice, Moore?
I just see.
Dell?
I just looked at because I was going to go receiver here no matter what. I was just trying to hit and sort of solidify my ones at positions. Odunze's, I don't want to say he's a lost prospect in this cycle, but he is penciled in at least for number 3. Some people have been moving him up to number 2, number 1. I truly believe the conversation is Marv, Malik Neighbors, and then Rome Odunze walked in like that. You can argue however you want on that. But Rome Odunze is, I mean, he's an elite contested catch guy. He was 6'3", 212 at the combine. So he's got the size, which is hilarious after the small receiver draft we had last year. We have all these, 6'1" and up guys that are coming out, and you just had to wait a year to get those guys. But he ran a 4.45 at the combine. He's got the speed. He's a contested catch monster. He's got great hands. He was part of the best passing attack in the nation at Washington, and that was with another guy who's presumably a day 2-ish pick in Jalen McMillan. He's an elite receiver. He's not – I don't think he's going to be more than what Malik Neighbors or Marv is. But when I looked at my options with DJ Moore and Devonta Smith and Tank Dell and Rashee Rice, I think Rice is the clearest number 1 if I had to pick one of these 4, just because we don't know how Hollywood's going to be implemented. But all of these guys have a ton of competition going in. We've got DJ Moore competing with now Keenan Allen and Cole Kmet, and we don't know what they're going to do in the draft in Chicago. And then Devonta Smith, you've obviously got A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert, Tank Dell. You've got Nico Collins. You've got Dalton Schultz, Rashee Rice, obviously Travis Kelce, now Hollywood. All these guys have competition. And at this point, being able to take Odunze, who is presumably going to be picked high enough to be a team's number 1 receiver, I like the odds of him ending up somewhere and taking over that role and establishing it over trying to buy into a guy that's already facing. I mean, each of these guys is facing at least 1, if not 2, competitive ball catchers in their offenses.
I like it. So we have a question in chat from Ryan here. Brock Bowers goes to tight end 2. We kind of skipped over that a little bit. Is that fair to you? Could you see him being the tight end 1 by the end of the season? Let me answer this question first, but I'm going to ask you, Tyler, take a look at the first 5 rounds, because people are watching who did the draft. Tell me someone in the first 5 rounds, a team besides your own, that you really like their core starting 5. So Ryan, I think it's a fair thing for Bowers, to be honest, to go there. I think there's a ton of upside in his game that you don't get to see a lot in a tight end coming into the league here. A lot of people, liked Kyle Pitts because of his physical ability on the field here. Bowers runs a little bit different than Kyle Pitts does personally. He on film, you see him run his routes almost like a wide receiver does. He came into college as a true freshman, didn't play high school ball his senior year because of COVID, and dominated the league his first year here. And he's been a great product of production over the last few years in Georgia, despite his injury this past season here. I think it is fair to say, if you're looking to build towards the future here, and the way that Shady's team looks, and again, it could be a team, situational situation, based the way his team is built. I mean, Brock Bowers going in the 4th round, a guy who in tight end premium leagues could end up be a guy who end up having 70 to 80 catches in a season. It's very possible. If he lands with the Chargers, I mean, you're looking at Justin Herbert's tight end 1 or pass catching number 1. He's linked to a lot of good places like the Jets. Could I see him ending up somewhere in the Colts situation potentially? That'd be a lot of Colts on one team if that happened to Shady. But Brock Bowers, I think there's a lot of good tight ends obviously out there. You see them all go in round 5 with Andrews, Pitts, McBride, and Hawkinson. But Bowers is only 21 years old. Doesn't turn 22 until just the end of the 24 season, basically. I think it is fair to say that it's definitely fair for him to go there. People might say it's early. You could definitely do that. People don't like to take rookies so early in a draft, especially how the tight end position is and how up and down the tight end can be for fantasy. But, if you say you took Sam Laporta there last year or Dalton Kincaid there last year in the tight end startup, you'd be sitting pretty happy and thinking it was like, oh, yeah, I got him. Maybe not at sleeper value, but you got him at value where that's where he's going. And Brock Bowers has the potential to be the best tight end, in the league in the next year or two, because his ability as a pass catcher is amazing to see on the field. I don't know how you feel about him there, Tyler.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump into the Debbie side of everything and kind of compare this to last year, because that's how I've really been viewing Bowers this draft cycle, right? So if you play Debbie, you know that the Debbie darling at tight end for the longest time was Michael Mayer, right? Notre Dame, going to be this elite baby Gronk before, there's little baby Gronk. But as you got closer to, or Mayer was the presumed, number one tight end in the class. But as you got closer and closer to the draft, especially around combine time, you start to see these other names pop up. Is Kincaid number one? Is Laporta number one? There was competition for that number one spot. And this year, there's some really good tight ends, right? Ben Sinnott, I think that's how you say his name, out of K-State.
Yeah.
Fantastic all-around tight end. He's an insane athlete, can catch the ball well. Jatavian Sanders out of Texas, great tight end, fantastic athlete, catches the ball well, was a good focal point in their offense. And he just, man-child over some people. And Bowers, as I started to go into this offseason and begin to look at rookies, I was scared it was going to be the same thing, where he produced in college, produced at a young age, just like Mayer did. He's the presumed tight end one, but we're going to start hearing all these things as measurements come out and as the media starts to get a hold of these guys, and there's going to be competition for that number one spot, just like Mayer, right? And it's going to be the Debbie darling, just starts to kind of fall out of the spotlight. But the thing with Bowers is, I know we still have a month till the draft. Nothing has come out to challenge him as tight end one in a class of, as pass catchers and in fantasy, some really good guys, right? It's going to be, I feel like last year, where we have 2 or 3 fantasy tight ends that can produce for your team. But this isn't a Michael Mayer situation, especially if you're coming from Debbie, you understand it. But I think Bowers is at least the tight end 2 if you're doing a startup right now, just because of the potential and, like you said, the age. But also, he has the skill set, he has the athleticism, he has the ability to go chase that number one tight end spot, especially in Dynasty, and especially if he ends up somewhere that's going to utilize a tight end, right? My big dream scenario for Brock Bowers has been that the Chiefs will find a way to trade up and snag him in the first round and just use him as the Travis Kelce replacement. There's like a 99.9% chance that doesn't happen. It does. You heard it here first.
That would be a bad first year, though. I wouldn't like that.
But, he falls into the lap of someone like Jim Harbaugh, who loves tight ends, and he's going to produce immediately, right? Especially, like you said, he's going to be the number one pass catcher in that offense. I don't think anyone would question that.
No.
He goes to someone, I've seen him mocked a lot, to the Jets or the Bengals, right, with these elite quarterbacks, and he's an elite athlete, right? Good quarterbacks are going to get elite athletes the ball. And so unless his landing spot is just the most atrocious place in the world, I don't see him not going at least tight end 3 in startup drafts. I think you could drop him down to tight end 3 if you're just scared off of rookies, especially at this point before landing spots. But I don't think that there's not a world that he's not a startup top 3 tight end. And once we know landing spot, it wouldn't surprise me if he shoots up to challenge that number one spot before we even see him in season.
That's fair. That's fair. So we have another question in the chat from Steve. I saw AR, Bryce Young, Stroud go in the first 3 rounds of a startup draft last year. Are Jaden Daniels and Drake May good values in mid to late round 4? Where do top rookies usually go in startups?
Yeah. I feel like they're a good value where they're at right here. We see I think Kirk's a little low, just considering the weapons around him, but he's also got a little age to him. But, we see Drake May and Jane Daniels go in round 4 here. We've got Deshaun Watson after them, and then we've got Kirk and obviously Bryce Young. And then the next quarterback taken after them is Baker Mayfield in round 8. At this point, we're all waiting on landing spots. There's news popping out today that J.J. McCarthy is supposedly going to go number 2 overall to the Commanders. We don't know what's going to happen in the drafts. But I think with the talent that both Daniels and May have, I think this is a great value for them because we are kind of waiting to see if Deshaun Watson can return to what he was when he was in Houston. We haven't seen anything that really even glimpses towards that yet. Kirk is a little bit older, so if we're going for Dynasty and you're not building a win now team, I don't know that I would love a Kirk pick. And then Bryce Young is, we didn't see a ton out of him last year, but there also wasn't a ton around him in terms of an entire franchise. So, you could take the shot on him, but also I think May with his, he's got some sneaky rushing upside, but he's just an accurate passer. And then Jane Daniels, that he can run and throw the ball with ease. We saw it all season. And so I think that this is a great value for them here. Or I wouldn't say great value. I'd say this is an accurate value for where they would go in startups, especially just where they fall in the teams that drafted them, right? We see Josh Allen in the first overall pick. And then we see you go get 2 elite skill players and then go get a quarterback in the 4th. And then we see with Steven, go get Joe Burrow, go get that elite quarterback, get 2 elite playmakers, and Puka and Olave, and then go get that young quarterback in the 4th. So if you're drafting a team like this and that's sort of your game plan is go elite number 1 in the front half, go get some playmakers, and then go get a young quarterback. This is, I think, an accurate representation of where they should go. And I think it's a good value check on who goes right before and right after them. Yeah,
no, I completely agree with you. I think it really is draft dependent, on a lot of these situations. It will depend how the draft falls. As you can see, there's a lot of wide receivers that go relatively early in this draft. Obviously, the receiver kick is big right now in fantasy football. There's a lot of players like Drake London jumped up. Nico Collins jumped up this past year. Michael Pittman's got a good play. You have Marvin Harrison. You have Neighbors up there. Brandon Ayuk's the top 3 pick now to a lot of people. Puka's up there. So a lot of wide receivers obviously rose over the last year probably if you looked at mock drafts. So it kind of pushed some of these, May and Daniels, I'm sure they have their question marks. And they're going to situations, maybe the Commanders and the Patriots, who people may not like. So you see them kind of drop a little bit in this draft here. But I think it's pretty fair to where they're going here. You get yourself, like Tyler said, a lot of good playmakers and then come back and get a rookie in the round 4 range. Could they go earlier? Absolutely. Could they go in round 3? I could see that happening. I've seen Dak fall in drafts. I've seen Tua fall in drafts. Obviously, Justin Fields, is likely not going to be up there next time around when you do another mock draft. The Goff and Watson, people might not want to take that approach there. If you look at Team 4, they're obviously going for more of a win now approach with their team. Not Team 4, but Team 12. They're going with that win now approach. So taking a rookie doesn't make as much sense. But, in a month from now, those guys could be top 3 round picks. But this is pretty solid value. I do agree with that, Tyler. I like the value you could get for these rookies right now that have big upside.
Mm.
All right, so we're going to come back to the question I asked you later on at the end because we're all running out of time here. I did say we were going to do an hour here, so we're going to go through a couple rounds here. We'll start with round 6 here. Give me a player in round 6 you really liked where they went.
I'm going to have to go Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed's been one of my guys. He was one of my guys going to the draft last year. Loved what he did at Michigan State. And I think he ended up in a perfect position. We've talked about Jordan Love a lot, at least seemingly since I've been on the show. It may have just been me talking about Jordan Love a lot. But Jaden Reed is in a good wide receiver room, but a wide receiver room that has enough questions to where he can be that elite receiver coming out of there, right? And he's got the younger I'll say younger quarterback in Jordan Love. But Christian Watson doesn't know how to stretch his hamstrings, apparently. Romeo Dobbs, he's a great name in fantasy, but he's also someone who hasn't been overly consistent. We have Dontavian Wicks, who can give you a couple. He's a really great best ball guy if you're going late in drafts. But I think Jaden Reed, just with the receivers around him, the Seattle receivers, we've got questions on, when is Geno's time going to be done? Is JSN going to supplant Tyler Lockett this season? What's it going to look like? DK Metcalf's going to get his share. But I think Jaden Reed, he's just been one of my guys, and I think it's a good value for him here coming off of, we've got a couple young guys. We've got a rookie in Xavier Worthy, got a couple old heads in Debo and Stephon Diggs who are kind of looking at the future and kind of up and down on, kind of questioning it. And then Zay Flowers, who we'll see what Baltimore does with pass catchers. But Jaden Reed, I feel like with that offense is in a spot to, had a very good rookie season and a spot to continue to grow. And I think he's just in the best position of these receivers outside of DK Metcalf to really be that number one. I guess I'll put Zay Flowers there too, because Mark Andrews is fighting him, but not fighting him. But Jaden Reed, I think he's just got the clearest path and the least competition in terms of how you could look at the rooms.
That's fair. I like that one. I do like Jaden Reed there in the 6th round right now. I'm going to skip over to round 7 here. I'm going to look at some players here that someone I don't mind having overall. I think George Pickens in round 7 is pretty fair value overall. I'm not seeing the jump where he's like a round 5 pick because now Deontay Johnson's gone. They have Russell Wilson. I was concerned that he was going to have a round 5 value because he's the wide receiver one there, the upside that he showed last year. I think round 7 is a pretty good value overall for him that you can get that I think has potential to jump into those top 4-5 rounds. If he has another great season here and you're getting him a few rounds later, guy who has potential big upside. I like that there. I like him long-term over guys like Evans, Cooper Kupp. Jordan Addison was a little interesting seeing him fall to round 7 there. But again, we have to wait and kind of see how that quarterback situation goes because he did have a really good season. I think that's probably even better value than George Pickens having Jordan Addison sit there in round 7 in the middle of the late round 7 here because he was great last year, even with Justin Jefferson on the field. He actually did better when Jefferson was on the field last season. So definitely good to see him sit there. No one else really stood crazy in round 7 to me, but it was, a lot of older veterans going off the board. Kittle, Kelsey, Adams, Kupp, obviously, guys like that. So what about round 8? Anyone in round 8 that kind of stands out for you? Someone that stands out for me, like I think it might be a little high, but I'll see if you can pinpoint it.
Round 8, if I had to guess who you're going to go high, I'd say maybe Hollywood. Or
that's good too. I didn't see it.
I don't know if I'd go. Oh, well.
It was Tajay Spears.
That's exactly
2 rounds over Tony Pollard. That was someone that was interesting.
That's who I just looked at. But a guy that intrigues me here is JJ McCarthy, getting him in, the 8th round with the buzz that's been around him in draft circles, and especially the necessity for a team like the Vikings to move up. And even apparently Sean Payton today was saying that the Broncos are in a place and they need to move up in this draft. Someone's going to go get him with a presumably top 5, if not top 10 pick, or I guess top 10, if not top 5 pick. And, getting that draft capital at, the beginning of the 8th round around quarterbacks, gets drafted right after Baker Mayfield, and he's the first quarterback taken before Will Levis, kind of like we talked about earlier. I think if he's getting the draft capital that he's supposed to get, then he's locked in for at least, 3 to 4 years of a starting position. We'll see what that looks like. I don't think he's a bad quarterback. I don't think he's going to be, the quarterback one in fantasy ever, unless he's just, the second coming of Tom Brady. But I think for the presumed draft capital and where he's being picked up here, I think it's a good value. It really depends on how you see the player over the value sometimes, especially with rookies. But I think if you're getting a top 4, top 5 real life draft capital pick in the beginning of the 8th round in Superflex League, I'm not mad about that at all.
All right. I like it. Let's kind of skip down to these middle rounds here. Look around and see if there's any sleepers you really like. And then I'll go first on this and let me see if there's anyone you like at late round value. So for me, there's a couple guys that do stand out in terms of late round value that I was like, oh, wow, that's pretty interesting. I want to go with I don't want to say my own team, but Marvin Mims sitting in round 14 is pretty interesting. I thought he'd go a few rounds earlier personally, especially with the bump with Jerry Jeudy leaving town here. Obviously him hopefully getting a bigger workload in 2024 here. Seeing him in round 14 was definitely interesting, in the likes of Treylon Burks, Gabe Davis, and Quentin Johnson. Like, I feel like there is more upside to him that he should maybe go a little higher, like Wicks in round 12. Like, I thought I like him. Thought that was a surprise because Mims should take over as a wide receiver 2 in this Denver offense. I don't expect them to draft a wide receiver in the early rounds here. If anything, they're going to hopefully get a quarterback upgrade potentially if they make a trade. So seeing Mims fall there. Another guy who I also really didn't mind at this point. To be honest, I'm not a big fan of Daniel Jones, but Daniel Jones sitting at round 15 in a Superflex startup draft is good value. I mean, I hate to say it. Again, he may not be the day one starter after 2024, but you get yourself a starting quarterback likely for the season. And if somehow he can fix his ways and stay on the field, I mean, you got yourself a really good quarterback in the later rounds. Again, I've never been a big Daniel Jones fan. I never probably will be. But in terms of fantasy, with just, you see the stats, you know what it is. I mean, if he can be on the field at least this coming season here, and he has that rushing ability, you get yourself a great third quarterback with Mahomes and Purdy. That was someone else I kind of didn't hate. Anyone here that stands out to you, Tyler?
Might be a little bit of a homer pick, but I look at Dalton Schultz right there in the 12th round, the end of the 12th round. He's taken as, if I counted correctly, tight end number 16 in this draft. And his last 3 seasons, which have been really his 3, we had his breakout season and then his last season in Dallas and his first season in Houston. We have in PPR, we have tight end 3, tight end 11, tight end 10. He's 27 years old. He just signed I want to say it was a 3-year extension.
3-year extension, yes.
Yeah. He just signed a 3-year, $23.5 million or $36 million extension, 23.5 guaranteed. But going off the board at tight end 16, I may or may not have auto drafted Darren Waller. I still don't know how he's above him in ADP, but there's just some names on here, Dalton Schultz is 27 years old, and he's a proven at least tight end 1 in your 10 or 12 team league. And again, we go back to being paired with an elite young quarterback. He's got CJ Stroud, right? I think that Dalton Schultz there at a tight end 16 value, who's going to be at least a tight end 12 for you, is a fantastic value for me, especially if we're in a tight end premium league.
That's fair. I like that. Is there another guy that might stand out to you?
One thing that did kind of shock me was Dontavian Wicks going before Romeo Doubs. I think that
he did. Wow.
It may have been name value that shocked me more that Romeo Doubs got taken after Wicks, but also I think Doubs is the better receiver. But that was just something that kind of shocked me. Also, Jatavian Sanders, we talked about the elite tight ends coming out in this class in terms of athletes and being able to catch the ball. And getting him down here middle of the 16th, it may have just been that people forgot about the rookie tight ends, but he's a guy coming out of Texas, 6'4", 240-ish, 250-ish. We'll see, what he weighs as the season starts. But he's, a grown man catching the ball. And, I am surprised to not see Ben Sinnott go here too. I'm just loving the rookie tight ends this season. But Jatavian Sanders in the 16th round, round 2, round 3 draft capital to a team that will utilize him, that becomes one of the best values here just because of who he is as a pass catcher. And so I think, going a little tight end heavy today. But Jatavian Sanders there at the 16th could be a steal if he's falling in your startup drafts and you believe in him and what he put together on tape at Texas.
Yeah, I like that there a lot there. Yeah, I think with how Sleeper's ADP is still a little messed up for adding in rookies for the draft, people could have overlooked rookies a slight bit there, which is unfortunate. I know at one point in the draft, I'm like, oh shit, there's rookies in here. I forgot. So I started looking. I was like, oh yeah, there's still a lot of players I like in terms of rookies, but I'm not mad with the picks that I made there, to be honest. There, again, seeing Zamir White go in round 12, I thought that he could go a little earlier, especially now that it seems like he has a starting job there with the Raiders, especially at the end of the season he had. I'm surprised he kind of went as late as he did. There's some definitely good tight ends that went late. Freiermuth, Musgrave, Cade Otton, like those guys are also pretty solid tight ends overall. The guy who gets Isaiah Likely in round 18. You're hopefully you're seeing a little jump there. You see guys like Devin Singletary, Zach Moss go into the later rounds there as well.
I was about to point those two out, especially Devin Singletary and Zach Moss after Damian Pierce.
Right.
There should be no running backs taken after Damian Pierce. And I say that as a Texans.
No, he should be where Dante Foreman is, or maybe Jamal Williams. But all right, so we're hitting the hour mark here. Let's give me one team that you really liked out of this draft here, outside of your own, obviously.
Not to be a kiss up, but especially talking first 5 rounds, I think your team is possibly the most ideal one to draft in terms of we look at first 5, but also just the way it's formulated. That first 5, you're getting your elite quarterback in Justin Herbert. You're getting Breece Hall, who, if the Jets can put it all together, he's possibly the running back 1 for the foreseeable future. You get Sam Laporta, who as of right now is the Dynasty tight end 1. You get Jalen Waddle, who's at minimum a wide receiver 2. If anything happens to Tyreek Hill in the next couple seasons in terms of retirement or he's sitting out of games, he's automatically bumped up into that, mid to top end wide receiver 1. And then you have Kirk Cousins, who just landed in, the granddaddy of all landing spots in free agency with Bijan Robinson and Drake London and Kyle Pitts and all these weapons. And we saw, they're going to run the ball more than Minnesota did 2 seasons ago. But we saw what happened when you give Kirk Cousins the ball and tell him to throw it 45 times a game. And that's, elite quarterback, quarterback 6. I'm very happy if 35-year-old Kirk Cousins is quarterback 6. And then we've got, your receivers coming down, DK, Devontae, Calvin Ridley, a little bit older on that back end right there.
Yeah. I got Derrick some young guys, though, at the end.
Yeah. Derrick Henry and Charbonnet, pairing Derrick Henry with Breece Hall could just be a great 1-2 punch. You're going to get a bunch of dump offs and no receiving work. So it's going to be a win-win situation for you. But you've got that, lightning in a bottle guy in Breece Hall, and you've got that grinder who's going to get all the short yards in Derrick Henry. Zach Charbonnet, I've talked about Kenneth Walker and his injuries. Charbonnet is a guy I like if he's not your only running back that you can play, if you've got him as a bench option. And even if not, he's still going to chip in enough to Walker's work to be somewhat viable as a flex play. Jerry Jeudy, Michael Wilson, Marvin Mims, and Josh Palmer to end out the receivers. You're taking shots at guys that can be leaders in their offense. Jerry Jeudy could surpass Amari Cooper somehow. Michael Wilson, he's the only one they got. Marvin Mims, he's fighting Courtland Sutton, but Marvin Mims is still, I think, a fantastic overall receiver. And then Josh Palmer, they've got no one there, right? That can change through the draft, but those guys all have the chance to be the one in their offense. Then we see Zamir White, Jalen Wright, Rasheen Ali. Zamir White, he's going to hold it down for the Raiders. Jalen Wright, very interesting running back prospect out of Tennessee, if I'm correct on that.
Yes.
He's a guy, he could be one of the sleeper running backs in your rookie drafts. He's a guy you got to kind of study up on and look.
They'll probably go higher once the draft is over. A lot of these rookies will go much higher once the draft's over.
Oh, yeah. But in your rookie only drafts.
Of course, yeah.
But he's a guy, a lot of people either believe in him or don't believe in him. You make your decision on that. And then Rasheen Ali, he is one of those deep sleepers that could be, the guy in the rookie class.
Right.
And so I like how you formulated your team, especially, you told me to look at the first 5 rounds. I think you hit all the positions in the first 5 rounds, but the way you constructed the team as a whole, I think was pretty good in terms of roster construction.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I did not tell them guys to say that, so
I'm getting the Venmo after this. Don't worry.
So I'm going to give you real quick, 2 teams here. Team 4, I really do like their first 5 picks overall. You have the solid quarterbacks. You have a really strong running back that hopefully will continue that success this summer season. I know TJ Hawkins is recovering from an injury, but I still think TJ Hawkinson is one of the elite tight ends of this class. And then you get a young wide receiver, Malik Neighbors, that honestly has a big chance to have a really good rookie season. I mean, we've seen a lot of these rookie wide receivers come in and produce off the bat. And I think if Malik Neighbors ends up with the Chargers, maybe not as much with the Bears, but Chargers. I'm trying to think of some other teams that he could end up on. The Jets,
Giants,
Giants, yeah. He's going to be the wide receiver 1 for a team overall. So I like that a lot. I do like the fantasy addict. CJ Stroud, Trevor Lawrence, Brandon Ayuk, DJ Moore, Rashee Rice, Stephon Diggs, Mike Evans. That's like more of a win now team right there. That I love a team that grows out and gets a lot of wide receivers at once there. Swift as your wide receiver 1. Again, not the best, but he's usable. You pick up Amari Cooper 2. Then you have James Conner, the solid RB2, Jerome Ford, Raheem Mostert if he has another good season. Then you have those running backs I mentioned, Singletary and Moss. Again, the tight ends, I wish maybe here you went Dalton Schultz over Raheem Mostert. I think that would have made your team probably the best team in this whole thing outside of my own. But, that the tight end group there is a little, sus. You don't know how well they're going to do. There's obviously good, Greg Dulcich is definitely an upside tight end, but he didn't play much last year. Chig Okonkwo, didn't have the work as we thought he would last year. Hopefully that changes this coming season. But Fantasy Addicts, overall, pretty good team. Team 4, I like their wide receiver. They're top 5 overall. So, but yeah, that is going to wrap up our show tonight, guys. We appreciate you all for tuning in and listening. We love having people view in the audience. Love it always. Questions are amazing. Love having questions. Tyler, is there anything you want to mention before we get going?
Gonna plug. We didn't do any ad reads. Go check out Dynasty Nerds. Use code COACH when you sign up. Dynasty GM is fantastic, especially this time as you're trying to value players versus picks and those rookie picks and how you're going to do trades. If you trade pre-draft, if not, go into the film room. Go check out all of our all 22 film. I know we just had another big update today that we had posted about.
Yes,
this is the best way to analyze rookies, right? You can look at what everyone says, but until you get eyes on them yourself, you're never really going to know who you like and who you don't like, and whose play styles you love and who you don't. So use code COACH, Dynasty Nerds. Me and Coach Steve both write for Dynasty Nerds. We both work with them. So, helps us out, but also helps you win your championships.
So it definitely helps us out here on our podcast there. So, but yeah, thank you all for tuning in. Again, if you guys like what we had today, please come back next week, all of April. We're going to be talking about rookies. We're going to be diving into basically most of the rookies we can possibly do in a 4-week span here. A lot we're going to get through, a lot of running backs, quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight ends. We're going to get into the nitty gritty of these guys and whether or not you should keep your eye on them during the draft. And then when rookie drafts come around, you're going to know who they are. And you can be like, yeah, he's got a lot of talent because the coaches told me so. So tune in next week. We'll be back next Monday. We'll be talking. We'll start off with running backs. So if you need a running back in your dynasty league, you need to know some of these guys. It's a perfect episode to tune into. So we thank you all for listening. Tune in until next time, guys. Thanks for listening. And have a good one.
Back to back is not far-fetched. We got a couple of flaws.